Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are here for an exciting session focused on youth in an energy sector, a fresh perspective. I'll be the moderator, Varsha More from ONGC, and I'll just introduce you the speakers for this session. So can we have Shri H. Madhavan, Executive Director, ONGC, Western Onshore Basin, on the stage, please. Mr. Madhavan is a postgraduate geology from a Presidency College, Madras. He has a distinguished career of 35 years in the oil and gas industry, where he had key exploration assignments in the different work centers of ONGC. He is a tech-savvy person and he's been instrumental in implementing many IT developments in the exploration part of the industry, especially in ONGC. To name the example is WebXP, which is being used widely today. He also has a youth-centric approach, which has been his forte. And one of the experience I'll share with him for the WPC Youth Forum, where he was instrumental in bringing World Petroleum Council in India. He is an avid swimmer and a tennis player, and who believes in a holistic living. We have on stage Mr. Madhavan. Another speaker, we have Mr. Jitendra Tiku, Chief Journal Manager, Geophysics Surface. He is the head of BMG Baroda ONGC. He is an alumni of IIT Roorkee, and he also holds a postgraduate diploma in a geothermal energy technology from University of Auckland, New Zealand. He has been associated with various field operations in acquiring the gravity magnetic data, the 2D seismic, the 3D seismic data. He has also been part of the interpretation team in Mumbai Offshore and Deepwater KG Offshore. He has invaluable experience in the joint venture operation and knowledge of contracts which governs the oil and gas industry, PSC, and revenue sharing. He has also been instrumental in organizing many technical events of SPG, APG, and he also played a vital role in organizing the WPC Youth Forum in 2010 in India. I welcome Mr. Tiku. We have another speaker, Ms. Pratiksha Kulshetya from BPCL and MOPNG. She is a legal professional with 10 years of experience in energy advocacy and handling legal and regulatory affairs of oil and gas sector. She currently addresses Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas in policy design and formulation and sector-specific strategy and development. She also assists in drafting of contract and dispute resolution. Welcome, Pratiksha. We have another young speaker, Mr. J. Solomon Douglas from ONGC. He is a postgraduate in geology from Delhi University. And to mention, he was also a gold medalist in his bachelor from DU University. He is a national level winner of Rio 21 Plus IYWC India program, which is United Nations Sustainable Development Program for Water Conservation. Currently, he is working in ONGC at Regional Labs Baroda. Welcome, Mr. Douglas. We have another speaker, Mr. Kalrav Joshi. Mr. Kalrav is a Senior Manager Network Development with Reliance BP Mobility Limited. He holds an MBA in Energy and Infrastructure from PDEU. He also has a Bachelor in Engineering, Electrical Engineering. He holds a Six Sigma certificate in with the Green Belt. During his academia, he had worked in electric vehicle policy with Gujarat Energy Research Management Institute. I'll welcome Mr. Kalrav. With this, now to set the stage for the audience, so what this session is about, especially for youth, I'll request our organizer, Mr. Prasanjit, to have a presentation online. So, to make a brief presentation, why this session? Why we have this session called Youth in Energy Sector, a Youth Perspective. Next slide. What is so special about youth that we have to conduct a special program for them? I could manage to write down few attributes which are inherent to the youth. They are environment sensitive, they are active thinking, They question the status quo from the today's leader. They will be the driver of change, and they are the millennium generation with the insta connectivity. So for this, we need to involve the youth who will be the future energy leaders for us, who will bring the change, who will face the change. For that, we as an organizing team thought there should be a session for the youth. I created a survey with my team to understand how the youth think about the oil and gas industry, what they think about the vision of 2050, how the industry will be. So I'll just share the brief insights of few of the outcomes of the session, of the survey. When I asked youth, what is your perception about the oil and gas industry? We got wonderful answers. It's a capital intensive. It's an economic booster. It's a job provider. It's diverse. It gives me a chance to be a global citizen. We have a dynamic career in different sectors. It's a pillar of the nation. We also received few setbacks. It's dirty, it's polluting, it's very volatile, it's unpredictable. Move on, next slide. So that was the perception of the youth for oil and gas. When we asked about them, how do you see the current pathway which is set by leaders? You will be happy to see that 83% agree that the current pathway set by leaders are correct. 19% disagree, and 8% unsure about the path which the industry had so far. A similar survey was conducted by Federation of Indian Petroleum Industry in 2020, where they asked the youth of all the oil and gas sector, the leadership in the oil and gas industry, are they changing is with the time? And you will be happy to see that 60% of the respondents said yes, the current industry, the management team is adapting to the change. And 34% said yes, there is a scope of improvement. Next slide. So that was the viewpoint on the current oil and gas industry. When I asked the youth, how do you see the future oil and gas industry, where the industry is going to go? You will happy to see the youth perception and the government perception are in sync. The Indian government thinks the energy sector will be growing at 4.2 compounded annual growth rate by 2040, which is also in line with the recent IEA statistics released just a couple of days ago for India, which states that by 2030, India will be taking over EU, and by 2040 will be the largest source of energy consumer. So yes, the industry is going to be vital in 2040 as well, and we will be the major source of demand. So when I asked youth, how do you see the future? What is your vision of future? Can you describe in 3 words? And I saw a mixed bag of reaction. Few said we have to produce, preserve, and conserve. Few said it will be challenging, but with possibility. Another said it will be resourceful, the industry is resilient, and it will be more responsible for the environment. It will be difficult, dynamic, and digitalized. And what a good example of digitalization we can see. We are having a virtual conference. Few said it will be innovative, collaborative, and reinventing. Can we have a next slide? I'll request the organizer, can we have a next slide? So when I myself thought how the 2050 is going to be, we definitely see the energy demand is rising. We see the production is also getting stagnant. So what role the renewable and alternative will play? Because we already have so many statistics available. I thought definitely I should ask the similar question. Can you go back to the previous slide? So how renewable energy is going to be. Do the youth see it as a challenge? Do you see it as a competition? Again, I got a mixed bag of reaction. Few said, no, we don't see it as a competition. We see it a game changer. It can be a disruptive technology in the future. Few said, it's an opportunity to expand the energy mix. We can expand the energy pie. Few said, yes, I do fear it a competition. I do fear it insecurity from a job. And to mention, especially youth between 20 to 25 years of age are scared with this. They said gradually it may overtake oil and gas industry. Few said no, renewable will help to balance the energy demand. And a wonderful response I got, it is a companion in the energy sector. Similar survey, I'll quote again, done by the FIPI, asked the youth, where do you see the maximum investment to be done in the cleaner energy? And you will be happy to see 32% said it will be in solar. And the next have said it will be in hydrogen fuel, you know. So we do see a mixed bag of the reaction for the alternatives. Next slide. I ask the youngsters, okay, this is your future perception. And do you want the current industry to change a bit? You know, what improvements do you want in the industry? So I got a reaction that they have to create an awareness how the industry is facing a challenge, how hard we are working for the energy security. Those needs to be highlighted. The diversification of to another energy sources to be brought in by the companies. We need to also take into part of the social impact for the development of the communities where we are taking the operations. And a echoing sound has come that the industry has to improve the public image, that nobody knows what hardship goes back into this industry. They can only see what's getting fueled in their vehicles, how they are getting electricity, how they are getting energy in their houses. They don't know the background of what is getting done. So I asked them, okay, this is what you want to improve. If you are given an imaginary role of being a CEO of the organization, what changes you would like to bring the lower the carbon emissions? And you see, we got a responses at micro level and also at the organization macro level. Few said we'll be adhering to the United Nations no flaring guidelines. Few said we have to give consideration to the carbon capture, its storage and usage in a enhanced oil recovery. There has to be total electrification of the land-based drilling. You said we have to give importance to the equipment in the industry. There has to be a good repair and repair policy. You said we have to think about out of the box about how to harness the geothermal energy in the abundant well. And I came across an interesting response. We have to think about inorganic growth of the organization by acquiring companies into renewable. And this is absolutely true. You see, the Total has recently acquired Adani's stake. So we can see this is coming in place. We have to go for the virtual meeting, paperless offices, and the micro level. We have to curb the use of plastics and we have to encourage the electric vehicles. With this, I think we got a wonderful feedbacks from the youth. And, you know, I'll just question today's audience. Can we have a next slide? You know, why we are all here? We can either be part of the solution or we can be a part of the problem. It all depends on you. So today we are discussing about it, being vocal about it, so that the changes can be brought in. With this, I'll take our chair and I'll discuss few viewpoints with our chair, Madhavan sir. How would you define the role of a young people in energy industry? What is the biggest contribution the youngsters can do or this generation can offer to the industry? Sir, can you unmute yourself? It's muted. I'll request
you have to unmute yourself.
Can you unmute, sir?
Prasanji, can you just check? Yes.
Madhavan sir, there's this down below, right below your screen, there's this mic button that you need to click, and then it should unmute. Okay, if that's not happening, maybe you'll need to refresh and kind of join back in. In the meantime, I think Varsha can pose a question to someone else while Madhavan sir.
So we have, I have another question for Tiku sir. Based on your career experience, what are the key elements you think is essential in developing today's youth into future-ready professional?
Tiku sir,
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Thank you. Well, I think the youth are already future ready because they are tech savvy. They know a lot more than what we did at our time. The information that is available on the internet and on the all the other platforms. What the youth basically require is to be more diligent, bring in a proper thought process. Sometimes you think in different pockets. I can do this, I should do this, we should do that. They should bring out a proper thought process. They should bring this thought process into action or see how it can be made into an actionable point. That is very important because the future is in their hand. So whether it is implementing the solar systems or it is the windmills or any other energy sources that would be using in the future, they should start giving their input now. Varsha?
Yeah, thank you, sir. That's quite an actionable. We have to do the walk the talk. Absolutely right, sir. Sir, I see you hold a degree in geothermal energy technology as well. So I think you can add another viewpoint. As we see, oil and gas industry also have environmental challenges. So do the alternative sources also have some kind of similar challenges?
Yes, they do have. In fact, oil industry is notoriously famous for being a polluting industry, and I beg to differ there. If you see some reports, and I have read it, they're available on internet also if you want to do a web search, that in the late 1990s, when the US started their wind farm projects, which are in their end of cycle now after 25 years, they don't know what to do with those wind blades. They have wind blade graveyards in Wyoming and other desert areas in US where they're just simply burying those blades, which is an environmental issue. And other than that, in fact, even solar panels have PVs, they have aluminum, they have silicon, they have lead, they have tin also. And these solar panels, which are at their end of cycle now, are also getting buried in landfills. Now, if you have lead and tin leaching into the soil, and if they touch the aquifer, groundwater, then you have a major problem. So all these technologies are good, but then you should be ready to recycle or dispose of them properly. Otherwise, there'll be a problem. And in India, especially, we require a proper legislation for that, and which is implementable. Right?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. That's quite a different viewpoint. I'll come back to our chair, Mr. Madhavan. Sir, how do you define the role of young people in energy industry? What's the biggest contribution we can do to the industry?
Yeah, I hope I'm audible now. There was a technical glitch.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I should compliment Varsha for an excellent presentation. You have taken the efforts to collect the information from all the young participants, and you have made a good presentation, which has given an insight into the thought process of the youth now. Now, if you ask me to because we have quite a lot of young VDNs who are virtually present in the conference. And if you ask me to define the role of the young people, I think this entire session is for generating the opinion and ideas of those who will be at the helm of affairs in 2050, be it the company, the country, or their own lives. It is they should define the role. So I better leave it to the youngsters to define the role. But as far as the second part of your question goes, what is the greatest contribution the younger generation today has to offer the industry? Now, from a BP statistical review, it can be seen that about 100 years back, in 1922, coal was dominant in the energy mix with 78%, and oil was just beginning to enter into the energy basket. In 1947, during our independence year, coal was still dominating with 40%. It had come down and oil was gradually rising. Now, in 2022, after 100 years, coal is relegated to 22%, while oil and gas, they are forming 30 and 25% respectively, and renewables have started entering. And as per their statistical review, in 2050, coal will be just 3% of the energy mix. Along with this changing parameters of energy mix, there are also conditions, many variable conditions which we face, be it social, political, environmental, economical, and after COVID, political, medical also. So with these many variables, the youth have to think one step ahead to be prepared to face the uncertainties. COVID has shifted the emphasis from globalization to localization. Instead of waiting for the Western world to lead and then follow, it is essential that we shift our thought process to resource conversion of hydrocarbons in our country, in whatever form it may be it CBM or hydrates. So the youngsters have to think in those lines. And this is possible with their young dynamism and agile thinking process. Youth can contribute to the industry by thinking ahead and bringing in emphasis on local resource conversion. That's it, Varsha.
Thank you, sir. I have another question, sir. Based on your life experience, what are the key challenges you faced and you're learning from that? And what are the similar analogs you can see in today's industry? The dilemma of when the youth join the industry, where we can fit in exactly.
No, as such, if I have to admit, I have not faced any challenge as such, because I don't take challenge as a challenge. I always take it as an opportunity to think differently. What I would offer an advice to the youngsters is, you always need to try, innovate and think differently. I have seen in one of your slides that somebody has given that also, innovate and think differently. So that is very essential. If you see, yesterday in one of the slides, you must have noticed, in 1964, our resources were calculated to be 5.8 billion tons. Now, after nearly 50 years now, it is estimated to be 41.8 billion tons. Now, where did this 36 billion tons come from? It is not that nature has generated this additional 36 billion tons in 50 years. It is our perception that has changed with the availability of fresh inputs and fresher thought process. So I always believe in the fact that reality remains, but perception changes. And this is how I approach the challenges also, because I know the challenge, it's a reality. But the way I look at the challenge, that can always be in a different way I can perceive it. That is where the perceptions have to change. So I would suggest that the youth need to train themselves to accept the change in perception and different thought process. It is very essential in our knowledge-based industry. And how do you develop this habit of looking things differently? How do you bring a change in your thought process? I'll give you a small example. Earlier, when you used to have this physical conferences, some of the participants, they used to sit in the far end of the conference hall. They will be only able to hear the persons. They will not be able to see them properly. So those participants, since they were connected only through audio, we used to call them audience. So now that I am seen in a very close quarters through video, and I'm very visible to all of you. I coined the term Vidians. So I call you all Vidians. So it was just a small change in a thought process which goes out of the convention, and that is very, very essential for the youngsters to break the conventions and think differently, because unless you have an out of box thinking, we'll still be in that same 5.8 billion tons resource. Since our perceptions changed, since we brought in a different attitude and aptitude in our way of working and thinking, from my experience,
I think
I would suggest that you should all follow this, thinking differently, and I know you will all do it.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for such a valuable, feedbacks for the youngsters. Now I'll take Pratiksha. Pratiksha Kulshetra, who brings on a different viewpoint, being a legal advisor. I have two questions for you. The Indian upstream sector has seen such a drastic policy changes in recent past. According to you, which one is more in line with our Vision 2050? And why so?
So you're right. In the Indian sector, there has been, you very rightly pointed out that in the Indian sector, there have been a lot of policy reforms. They are all targeted towards a common goal of increasing production, which in turn is intended to bring about our objectives of meeting energy access, energy security, energy sustainability, and energy justice to the people of India. So policies actually work like a system rather than in isolation. And I would say that there are different kinds of policies. So certain policies are meant to just fill in certain gaps. For example, when the COVID-19 pandemic happened, it was rather unclear whether it would be classified as a force majeure situation, which basically is like a pause on contractual obligations for a defined period of time when both parties, because of any unpredictable situation, are unable to perform their contractual obligations. So there was a policy defining that pandemics will be treated as force majeures under various kinds of contracts. Then there are incremental reforms. A case in point would be the policy on streamlining the working of PSCs, where we created some enabling environments for Northeast region E&P operators by allowing them special dispensations in the form of extension and exploration periods and special rights of marketing and pricing freedom of natural gas. Then there is a class apart of policies which bring about a paradigm shift in the entire sector. And the classic case in point would be health. And that is the policy which I would say is the most significant changes and significant policy reform, which has really put in India on the right track for meeting its 2050 requirements. So what are the significant aspects of health? Let me take you through those. And as you know, ease of doing is a major part of our agenda, and we want a simplification of the processes. Health does this through two main routes. One, it allows for a unified licensing policy. What that means is that for let's say, conventional operations, for non-conventional kind of operations, you don't need different kinds of licenses. So we've simplified that process. Earlier, our contractual regime under the policies used to be based on production sharing, which required a lot of government interference and monitoring, and there were issues of gold plating of costs by operators. So it called for a lot of back and forth between the government and the contractors. Now we have a very simple mechanism called the revenue sharing contract, which more or less functions literally on its own. We have allowed self-certifications, which have further simplified the processes and made it a more business-friendly model. One of the most significant changes under the health is that earlier blocks would be carved out by the government, and though this was a business where the entirety of the risks were to be taken by the investors, they would be bound by the four corners that are drawn out for a block by the government. Now this is not the case. Under the health, they can carve out their own blocks based on the data that is available on their national data repository. So that is a major step, making them, enabling them rather to make more informed choices about what investment risks they want to take. Then we have fiscal incentive schemes under that, where we've given exemptions from cess on crude. Then we have given reduced royalties. And then in 2019, we went one step ahead with policy reforms for health. You could even call it the better health, where we gave concessional royalties. We said that even revenue sharing in category 2 and 3 sedimentary bases, we will not be asking for them except in windfall gains. So yes, all of these things put together would help in meeting the production targets and making it aligning it with the rest of the larger goal of meeting energy access and energy security. Then there are certain newer concepts that we are working on, but they are still work in progress. One of the most on topic policy would be the national mission on sorry, I'm forgetting the name, the biofuel policy, which is very pertinent in this context.
Thank you, Pratiksha, for adding a different angle. So I can see that HELP is really going to open up a huge area for exploration in India. I can come across another thought in my mind that you are someone who is working in policy framework for oil and gas. So do you see there's any scope for involving the another energy sources in the current framework? Can we do that?
Yes, absolutely. I think there will be a healthy energy mix that is definitely there. Even in the current scenario, you would see 2030, we are already talking about 15% gas being involved and 20% ethanol blending being in petrol being two of our targets just for 2030. Then going forward, there are very interesting developments which are happening in the industry. On 9th of February, ONGC has released a report where they are saying that they are going to set up the first geothermal power plant in Ladakh. Then another very relevant development happened through Shell. KLM has taken up its first flight where part of the fuel is synthetic kerosene, which is being produced through by use of water, carbon dioxide, and the entire processing has happened through renewable energy resources using solar energy. So we will be seeing this kind of an interesting mix where even oil and gas industries through their core oil and gas operations would be talking about a carbon neutral or a net zero emission economy where energy mix will be part of the picture. Then other parts, as I said, I talked about biofuels. So biofuels is a core area where sustainable goals are being met, where we are trying to reduce all kind of waste and convert it into energy resources. So that's already part of our plan. Indian Oil Corporation Limited is working on hydrogen-based, hydrogen mixed CNG, HCNG, and those kind of things are really coming up now.
Thank you, Pratiksha, for quite an overview of the happening. Now I'd like to have any questions from the audience. I'll just introduce the speaker, Nikhil Singh Kulwaha. He's an undergraduate, senior year, petroleum engineering. He's doing his petroleum engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, ISM Dhanbad. He has done his internships on EOR, Enhanced Oil Recovery and Induced Oil Recovery with University of Technonati, Petronas, Malaysia, and also with Kane Oil and Gas. He's a winner of SPE Petrobowl Asia Pacific Region Qualifiers Team in 2020. He also won a case study based on oil field development organized by Shell in 2019, and he was also runner-up for the Energy Outlook 2040 organized by Shell. I think it's a privilege to have Nikhil on stage. I'll request the backup team to please bring him on stage. Hello, Nikhil.
Hello, ma'am.
I see you are a budding petroleum engineer whose core expertise in oil and gas. In fact, your resume also, somehow speaks for that. So do you see renewables as a challenge for you? Do you feel insecure about it? What is your feeling for that?
First of all, thank you, ma'am, for the introduction. I'm Nikhil Singh Kushwaha, Petroleum Engineering undergrad at IIT ISM Dhanbad. What I think is that with additional restrictions on fossil fuel generation and more government subsidies on the renewables, it will be more challenging for the oil and gas to compete in the energy space, while oil price and public perception may act as near-term threats to the industry, and industry influx is an opportune time for new entrants to make their mark. Whenever we talk about the use of renewables, especially in context of India, what I feel is affordability and infrastructure will remain the most important criteria. There is a lot of room for India to grow in both of these departments, infrastructure and affordability. There will definitely be the shift from fossil fuels to renewables, but that would be very slow and gradual. It's a very long process as we are using fossil fuels for centuries, and it won't meet a dead end anytime sooner. And even green fuels are not 100% green. But yeah, they will definitely come into picture in the coming future. And as it is said that challenge breeds opportunity, use of renewables will definitely enhance our energy mix. And as far as engineering as a profession is concerned, in any discipline, it is constantly evolving as it is disrupted by technology and regulations. And petroleum engineering is in the midst of a transition period driven by technology and especially automation and artificial intelligence. And one thing that I'm very much sure about is that the industry that I'll be entering as a fresher will not be the same industry that I'll be retiring from.
Excellent viewpoint, Nikhil. I have, in fact, another question for you. It is said that the days of easy oil is gone. Now we in the industry is trying to extract every drop which is left over through our IOR and EOR, or with the different technologies. Do you see it as a burden on you, or do you see it as an opportunity? Because you are left with the difficult oil when you are entering the industry, you will be dealing with the difficult hydrocarbon.
Yes, ma'am. I see this as an opportunity. The EOR method that we are currently using, such as the alkaline surfactant flooding, immiscible hydrocarbon water alternating gas injections, immiscible CO2, microbial in situ stimulation. There are few challenges that these EOR methods are facing, like the legacy infrastructure and rising operating costs. So we, as the young generation of petroleum engineers, needs to overcome these challenges and should integrate new development within the current facilities and add new facilities to the existing ones. Apart from these EOR methods, there are few advanced EOR technologies that can also be used in Indian oil and gas fields, such as nanotechnology and nano EOR. EOR methods involving nanoparticles are still under research. We can also incorporate these novel EOR methods because they can be more economical and more feasible as compared to the method that currently we are using. And we do understand the fact that days of easy oil are gone, but we are still in February, yet we have great news so far that there are so many oil and gas discoveries being made so far this year, such as oil and gas field in Malaysia, oil field in Norway and Brazil, and significant oil discovery recently in Egypt. So I feel it's just a matter of time. We might see some major hydrocarbon discoveries in India as well.
Thank you, Nikhil, and thank you for your participation. Now I'll move back to our speaker. Thank you, Nikhil, very much. I'll move back to another speaker, Kalrav, who has a different set of career graph. He is from the distribution part of the industry. When I see your profile, Kalrav, you have been a key member in migration execution team responsible for migrating from the old company model to a new JV company model. And you have taken a big accountability quite early in stage of your life. Can you share some experience insights with the youngster, how you carried out, such a responsible job at such an early stage, whether you were scared or you took it as an opportunity? Can you share the insights of it? Kalrav, you are not audible. I think you're mute. You are in mute mode.
We can't hear you. Maybe you'll have to rejoin again. Maybe some device.
Yeah. Kalrav, I think you have to rejoin it. Meanwhile, I'll go to another speaker. Here's Mr. Debanjan from the academia. He holds a very unique profile. He is a fourth-year PhD student who is a research scholar in Department of Earth Sciences in IIT Bombay. He's currently working in pore categorization of gas shale and coal for gas recovery and carbon storage, which we keep on hearing the buzzword. He has published 5 research papers and also won a SPE student paper competition for the South Asia Division 2020. I'll request the backstage to, can you bring Debanjan Chandra on the dais?
Hi everyone, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. We can't see you.
Okay.
But you're not visible.
Yeah, that's good. Hi, welcome Debanjan. See, I see your profile working in very niche area of, carbon capture and, possibility and also on an unconventional fuel. So if given an opportunity for you to work in an industry, what problem you would like to tackle with your know-how skills?
Oil and gas exploration is essential for the energy security of a country, but of late, due to the high carbon footprint of oil and gas, as Mr. Jitendra already said, that we have a negative perception about these fossil fuel resources, and these industries are kind of marked as carbon emitters, major carbon emitters. So, however, the CO2 enhanced recovery option can easily offset some of the CO2 emitted from the large point sources which are using these fossil fuels and make the exploration operations sustainable also. Like enhanced recovery can boost the production of the hydrocarbons also. So currently there are a few operators worldwide who have tried the CO2 enhanced recovery of hydrocarbons, but that number needs to increase pretty soon. So, and also as stated by Ms. Varsha, for the last 3 years that I am doing my PhD on the pore characterization of shale gas and CBM reservoirs and how it affects the CO2 enhanced recovery. So I would like to carry forward my understanding gained from my research and implement that knowledge on understanding the petrophysical and geomechanical attributes of Indian gas shale and CBM reservoirs for a wider and safer implementation of CO2 enhanced recovery.
Thank you, Debanjan. I have another question for you because you are the one of the speakers who is working in carbon storage area. According to you, what are the major challenges India is facing, if it's going to carry out the carbon sequestration?
Okay. Yeah, the main challenge in the carbon storage area or the sequestration area lies in the lack of understanding and the lack of continuous supply of CO2, and above all the safety issues which are involved with the injection process. So in the last decade, much work has been done worldwide on understanding the geomechanical response and hydrocarbon production behavior with CO2 injection in depleted oil and gas fields. Accurate fault mapping and continuous monitoring with 4D seismic, 3D seismic of the well and the surrounding region, as well as the surrounding water bodies after well closure, that has reduced the risk of CO2 migration into areas which have public settlement or public usage as well. So a detailed characterization of depleted hydrocarbon reservoirs in India is in progress for CO2 storage feasibility study in many institutes and in many center of excellences as well. However, the major challenge has been in the lack of continuous supply of CO2. So CO2 capture and transportation infrastructure in India has not been well established yet, and a cluster structure is required for a continuous and high flux of pure CO2 supply towards the storage sites. So public perception of CO2 also needs to improve if the carbon storage is to be implemented in a larger scale. And there are some misconceptions about CO2 storage, not only in India, but in worldwide, and its importance also needs to be explained in great detail. However, favorable policy implementation for capture and storage parties and a stable carbon pricing agreement needs to be in place for a swifter transition towards a large-scale sequestration process.
Thank you, Debanjan. Thank you for your participation and giving us a solution kind of answers with your know-how skills. I'll move back to Kalrav actually. We were discussing about your experience of handling responsibility quite early in your stage. So can you share a few insights, please?
During the due diligence that was happening, British Petroleum being an expert at a global level, they were eyeing this Indian market to enter the retail business. They are already working in the upstream business with Reliance since many years now, but the retail industry is much more dependent on the compliance of regulatory affairs, the risk factors, and as this being a product which is hazardous, many checks are to be done. So during the due diligence, the consulting firm of the BP came down to the outlets, and we, being the field staff, were given the responsibility to showcase what we as an Indian fuel retailer would bring to our partner, and we successfully completed this. It was a very huge responsibility to showcase our Indian strength to a British company, and we successfully did that. It was a very tough task to make their expectations meet their expectations, and the experience was very good at this early stage.
Yeah, so that's why I say your learning graph has been quite steep. On a survey response, you have given a wonderful answer on comparison between energy intensity and energy efficiency. You pointed out about the energy availability at the bottom of the pyramid. Can you briefly elaborate on that? We are running short of time. Can you briefly encapsulate that?
So what I mean to say is that we talk about energy efficient, being energy efficient. Yeah, we can improve technologies, but are we providing the energy to the to the needy, to the poor? Are we reaching the rural areas of the country? That's what my question back was, because if we compare the energy on a global level, we are not in this country, we are not penetrating the market yet, the real market, and they are still dependent on localized grids.
Okay, so in fact, one of the similar question, I came across a wonderful response which states, I'll just read out to the house: with improving technology and energy efficiency, energy intensity will no longer be the correct parameter for the development. A new parameter should be encompassing the intensity of various sources and efficiency of individual sources, along with the micro level participation from the citizen of the country. With that, I'll move to another speaker, Mr. Solomon, who's working in ONGC. He has given some wonderful viewpoints to the survey, who mentioned about electric car dominance in India in coming future, wrote about something about electric charging point and how the geopolitics arena is going to shift when the USA has again joined back the climate change accord. Can I have Solomon, please?
Thank you, ma'am. There are actually two parts to the question you just asked. First, I'll address the electric vehicle part and the charging points. I surely believe in the next 10 to 15 years, basically this coming decade, there will be a huge paradigm shift in the way we travel, basically the mobility sector, the electric vehicles. Case in point is the rapid exponential expansion of Tesla Motors itself. It's a prime example in front of us. In 2003, when it was founded, the very idea of electric vehicles or electric mobility was ridiculed. Now, 17 years later, in 2020, it became the single largest car manufacturer in the world. It's not just electric car manufacturer, but single largest car manufacturer. This shows that people are willing to go for electric and shift to more renewable resources. They are also concerned about the environment. In India also, our indigenous car makers like Tata Motors and Mahindra are also coming up with their own solutions and with their own vehicles regarding electric mobility. Now, while setting up any electric mobility program and implementing it anywhere in the world, the first challenge that we face is the presence of the basic charging infrastructure. That is the same problem that we have, challenge I would say rather, in India also. As if I get this I have the option of buying one car out of one is the electric and one runs on conventional fuels, priced at the same point. Any person, most of us, the former one, that is the conventional fuel one, fearing that we don't have the necessary charging infrastructure right in front of us right now. One way I think to tackle this is that large oil marketing companies or OMCs, which already have the petrol pumps set up all around India, around 50,000, about that. So they could tie up with the Indian Energy Exchange. And right now, how they buy fuel from the refineries, they could buy electricity from the grid itself and support it. The advantage of that is it forms a positive feedback loop. First, they give us the infrastructure, but it's not just as simple as I've said that they can just build the infrastructure and we have it. There are some regulatory reforms also that has to take place. But it forms basically a positive feedback loop. The infrastructure will be there. That will create more demand. Greater the demand, more funding will come into the arena.
Yes, what I can see is, I'll just enter. What I can see is you're talking about the demand and the supply cycle of the business.
Yes,
I'll get back to you in another question, your viewpoint. When in the survey you were asked if you were the CEO of the organization, what changes you bring? You mentioned about the centralizing the processing centers, something on solar farms and the high energy density battery farms. I'll request you to encapsulate your views in a very brief, because we are left with a few time.
Sure. So if I had been a CEO of my organization, what I would do is, specifically talking from the perspective of ONGC, we have various processing centers at various work centers around India. We could basically centralize them at a single place instead of having them spread out all over India. Like we have 4 RCCs in Jorhat, Chennai, Kolkata, Kolkata, and we have Geopic in Dehradun, and SPIC in Mumbai. We can centralize all these organizations at a single place because that would in turn lead to decrease of carbon footprint, overall carbon footprint, instead of spreading it out all over. The second thing is the various accommodations which ONGC provides or any E&P industry provides at various basins and assets level. The energy requirements of those can be met via creation of solar farms, which I think we have the resources to build. On top of that, we can get, I would just like to summarize the high energy battery density farm thing, because say if we create more energy than what we want, we can tie up with the energy companies to sell it back. So in that way, we will have a financial incentive also to go for it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Solomon, for your innovative insights. I'll take another question or participation from a student. We have Anvesh Kumar Padhyay, a graduate in electrical engineering and currently doing an MBA from energy and infrastructure from PDEU. So as I see your profile, you responded something on future geopolitics, that the rosy days are about to come. Can you just briefly describe? What do you mean?
I thank you, ma'am, for providing me with this opportunity. It's a great privilege to talk to this panel. Ma'am, the rosy days are about to come. I was following the news of Israel. Traditionally, the Arab countries and Israel have always been at odds due to their religious or socio-political issues. Israel has also turning out to be a significant player in oil and gas, given the gas they have struck out of the coast of Levant, the Sea of Levant. Also, we see Australia emerging as the leading LNG player, leaving aside the traditional largest LNG player, that is Qatar. The perspective that I had in my mind while answering this question was, it is not now the seller's market, it is the buyer's market. Dharmendra Pradhan, in his negotiation, India sits at India has an inherent advantage being one of the leading energy consumers in the world. It can arm twist Qatar or Middle Eastern countries to accept its terms. So there will be new players entering in, as Mr. Nikhil from ISM Dhanbad clearly said. Quite encouraging trends are coming up from various countries, wherein like the various different oil and gas assets have been found. So it will clearly signal what I believe. I am always I am an optimist. I believe that there will be a great change, wherein we will not traditionally depend on Middle Eastern producers. There will be many other players entering in, be it Russia, be it USA, one of the leading shell producers. So that was my perspective when I answered this question.
Okay. Thank you, Anvesh, for your participation. I'll just take quickly another participation from the student, Udvash Das Gupta. He's a final year student of Applied Petroleum Engineering at UPES Dehradun. He has been part of many international conferences, to name a few: ADIPEC 2019 and Russia Energy Week. He is a core member of technical and editorial committee of UPS SPE chapter and also a lead placement representative for his batch. So can we have Mr. Udvash? Yeah. Hi, Udvash. Hello. So, on similar line, in your survey, our survey response regarding anticipation and changes in geopolitics. So you mentioned a different viewpoint altogether, a lithium triangle, So can enlighten the audience, what do you mean by the lithium triangle in the future and how it's going to play a role?
First of all, I express my deepest regards to one and all present here. And talking about the lithium triangle, it is basically 3 places in Southern America, especially Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina, which contributes to nearly 45% of the silicon amount presence over there in the world. So as we are moving towards renewable energies, we are seeing high impetus being given on solar panels, on electric vehicles. So over there, we know silicon is essential because it is a tetravalent element and we can dope it to make semiconductors. And silicon is also an essential part in the photovoltaic cells. So as we move towards a more renewable future with high impetus on silicon, India needs a high amount of silicon. So it will try to focus on these 3 countries. And this is also reiterated in many editorials in the Hindu newspaper. One follows. We have been seeing how increasing focus is being going there. Still now, we knew OPEC countries would had the gearing, the steer and control the oil and gas industry with his thumb and with his might. Now, when world moves towards a new net carbon zero within 2050, we need to look forward to other sources of energy. And we also see how Saudi Arabia, the leading producer of oil and gas, is saying that we want to be the next Germany in renewables. So a shift is there, and for India to be a part of shift, it has to change its foreign policy from a little bit down from Middle East to it's for its future if it focuses on renewables along Southern America, European Union especially, and Germany, which has been a leading global hub for renewable energies development.
Okay, thank you, Udvash, for your valuable comments. We are running short of time, so I'll just wrap it up quickly. I'll try to do in 1 minute. So we have seen a gambit of, yes, sir.
Varsha,
yes,
I
sir.
have just one. I am not that old to give a word of advice, but I'll just tell the young professionals who are watching right now that, follow your heart and try to become entrepreneurs also, because working a 9-to-5 job is fine. But India does need entrepreneurs, which will give new ideas, which will move the business, which will move that Atmanirbhar Abhiyan that our Honorable Prime Minister has started. Right? That's all.
Thank you, sir, for a motivation speech. You should be a technical mindset and entrepreneurial by heart. That's how I encapsulate. I'll just try to sum up. We have seen from prospect to prosperity. Where prospect, I'm meaning in the mind of geoscientists when they see the oil and gas in the seismic data. Prosperity, I mean, it runs through the hand of petroleum engineer, production engineer, pipeline, and distribution, and finally lending to a sales manager who is the face of the industry. So the hydrocarbon has a full cycle from prospect to prosperity, and it's going to be vital in the coming future. We are not going away. We are inevitable. We will be definitely having a companion of renewables, and we will be adjusting to it. We'll be making adaptability at the micro and a macro level. We have discussed about the policy framework of health. We have discussed about the renewables being not so renewable, and we have seen the distribution part, how the people are changing the mindset, policy reform changes, organization changes, which we want to improve. So what in the end I'll just quote a phrase: we cannot build the future for our youth, but what we can do is build the youth for our future. These are the words from the President Franklin D. Roosevelt. With that, I'll close and I'll request everyone to just think about either you are a part of a problem or you are a part of a solution, but just think about and be vocal about it. That's all from my end, and I'll wish everyone a happy day ahead and a good day ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Varsha.
Thank you, Varsha.